Okay, so we're going to talk about the basics of statistics, starting with the word statistics itself. Whenever you hear the word statistics, there's actually two different definitions that they could be describing it as. So one definition is actually a science. It's the science of collecting, organizing, and interpreting data. So how do they collect it? What methods do they use to organize it? And what does the data actually mean? Okay, so that's one main use of it. And then the word statistics itself, unfortunately, is also used to describe data that is summarized. Okay, so when we say statistics, in the general sense, we're referring to the methodology, the organization, the display, the interpretation of the actual numbers. And when we talk about data themselves, we're also referring to statistics in it. So we'll try to clarify a little bit better about when we're going to use which definition. All right, so let's bring up some more terms. The population in a statistical study is the complete set of people or things that are being studied. So that's the thing we actually want to get information about, is what is everyone thinking? What is everyone doing? Now, it's not so easy to collect information about everyone, so sometimes we ask about a smaller group, and the sample is the subset of the population from which raw data are actually attained. Sample is the group that we actually physically collect data on, and then theoretically we take that smaller group's information and generalize it to the population. Population parameters. Population parameters are specific numbers describing the characteristics of the population. Sample statistics are numbers describing the characteristics of the sample. Now, one interesting thing to note, whenever you hear the word parameter, you want to think about population. So population, parameter. And sample statistics both have S's, so sample statistics, just overly emphasize. So when you hear those two words used, just remember, sample refers to statistics, population refers to parameters. Okay, so we're going to describe the population sample, population parameters, and sample statistics from this following sentence. Agricultural inspectors for Jefferson County measured the levels of residue from 3 common pesticides on 25 ears of corn from each of the 104 corn-producing farms in the county. Okay, so let's first look at what the population is. So the population that we're interested in, what's the overall thing that we're trying to study, and that's the ears of corn in the county. Okay, the sample, so what did we actually go out and collect? Well, we collected it from the 25 ears from each farm. So the 25 ears of corn would count as the sample. Okay, the population parameters, so what are we measuring? It's the average levels of residue in the corn grown in all the corn in the county. And the sample statistics would refer to the actual the actual measurements we got from the 25. Okay, so hopefully we're starting to get the sense that sample is a very specific based on what we collected, whereas population is more general and based on what we're trying to make an analysis of. Okay, well, let's talk about how we get this data. What do we do with it? So in doing that, we have some basic guidelines for a statistical study. So the first guideline would be to state the goal of your study precisely. Why are you collecting the data? What is it you hope the data will show, or what is it you're trying to gather evidence on? Number 2, choose a representative sample from the population. Number 3, collect raw data from the sample and summarize the data by finding sample statistics of interest. Number 4, use the sample statistics to infer the population parameters. And number 5 is draw conclusions. So once we gather the data, we look at what the data tells us. Each month, I just realized this is on 2 different pages. Each month, the U.S. Labor Department surveys 60,000 households to determine characteristics of the U.S. workforce. One population parameter of interest is the U.S. unemployment rate, defined as the percentage of people who are unemployed among all those who are either employed or actively seeking employment. Describe the 5 basic steps of a statistical study applies to this research. Okay, so what's our goal, and then what are we trying to do? Okay, so let's go through step 1. What is our goal of this research? What is it we're trying to gather evidence on? And we want to learn about the unemployment rate of all Americans. Let's see. Learn about unemployment rate of all Americans. Is the reason why we're researching. Number 2, to refer to choose a representative sample. So the sample that we are analyzing is people employed or seeking employment in 60,000 households. Households. Okay, number 3, let's see, the Labor Department is going to ask questions of people in the sample, and their responses will constitute raw data from the research. So they're just going to ask people, do you have a job? And someone's going to write down yeses or nos based on what they say. All right, so ask questions and their responses will be the data. Okay, number 4 is use the sample statistics to infer population parameters. So based on the sample, they'll make an estimate on what the what the population is, the unemployment rate of the population. All right, and then the fifth part is to draw a conclusion. So in this case, we would decide if the unemployment rate is getting better or worse. Sorry, decide if unemployment rate is getting better or worse. Place getting better or is it getting worse? Pretty straightforward. Representative sample is a sample in which the relevant characteristics of the sample members are generally the same as those in the population. Okay, and then we're going to look at some different sampling methods. So a simple random sample is where we choose a sample of items in such a way that every sample of the same size has an equal chance of being selected. A systematic sample is where we randomly pick a starting point and then we ask every certain 10th person at that starting. So I might pick like every 5th person. So count people that go past, and every 5th person will stop, and I'll ask them whatever question I'm going to ask them. So we would call that a systematic sample. Next method is not really a good method, but it's called a convenience sample.